Yet another wild weekend of college basketball. Plus, we got the NCAA Selection Committee's top 16. Where did they get it right and where did they go horribly awry? We'll figure it out.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national hoop show out there. I am your host, Isaac Schade, and joining me today is not Andy Patton. In fact, it is Lukas Harkins joining the show for the first time. Lukas is a national college basketball writer and bracketologist for HeatCheckCBB. We love the guys over there and wanted to get Lukas on as we're really getting into the bracketology conversation. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals in 2023. Post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Well, folks, coming up on the show today, we are indeed going to talk about that top 16 reveal. As we do every Monday, we will have our six-pack for you, and we have to start with the biggest matchup of the weekend, Baylor at Kansas, and our top fives all coming at you. So, Lukas, so good to have you on, brother. Welcome in to the show. Big picture stuff here. Number 9 Baylor at number 5 Kansas, the last two national champions. Pretty fun stuff there. And I got to be honest with you, I'm watching this game in the first half, and I'm like, holy smokes, this three-guard lineup of Baylor that we just pump up all the time is about to run away with this thing. Keyonte George, Adam Flagler, LJ Cryer score 42 of Baylor's 45 points in the first half. But holy smokes, did this thing turn. Phog Allen magic is alive and well. James Naismith's ghost is doing something in there. As you watch these two teams, first off, let's talk about the game itself, and then I want to get your take as a bracketologist on both of these teams. But let's start with the game. What did you see?
Well, a lot of times I saw my in-laws, because I was at my in-laws' house. I watched the entire first half pretty clear. I had the same takeaways as you. Baylor's guards looked tremendous. The second half was a fair amount of looking into the other room because that's where the TV was. And it really was one of those games where I really couldn't believe it. Like it was hard to see from, having watched the first half, what happened in the second half in terms of a comeback. But you're right. I mean, Kansas is always tough to beat at home and to play a really hard it's a really tough 40 minutes to win in the Phog. And I think Baylor knows that just about as well as anybody, and the entire Big 12 knows that. Playing at Kansas is a near impossibility. And in this year's Big 12, playing on the road against anybody, it feels that way. It just feels like everybody's holding serve at home in their big games this year. And Kansas is no different in that regard. And I think both these teams are really, really outstanding and ones that opponents will be happy to see them on a neutral floor in March.
That's right. Speaking of a neutral floor, that's the next question I want to ask. This was a 33-point swing from Baylor's biggest lead with 3:30 left in the first half. They're up 17. Kansas ends up winning by 16. I mean, that's just insane, Lukas. Insane.
Yep.
If this game was on a neutral court, does Baylor still pull that off? I mean, we saw it in the national championship game last year. Do you think Kansas still wins this game on Saturday on a neutral?
Probably. I think it's the one that they're able to generate that type of momentum coming out of halftime. And regardless, if you're at a neutral site, there's still enough momentum that comes through that crowd. It's a little different, I would say, if the run really came like mid-second half, where they didn't make an adjustment at halftime and come out of the break. But Kansas came out pretty strong out of halftime. I think this is one that run obviously is benefited by Kansas having its home boost, but also I think they're able to make that run. It might not be a blowout like it turned out to be in terms of final score, but I think Kansas has had that kind of push coming out of halftime that probably still exists, because it's hard to imagine Baylor plays a better first half.
That's so true. So true. And Jalen Wilson got unhinged right before halftime, and then he found his way a little bit more in the second half, made a killing at the free throw line there. Now, Lukas, obviously you're a bracketologist. We want to talk about that. In terms of both of these teams' postseason outlooks, I mean, listen, like you said, the Big 12 I mean, it's just this ridiculous gauntlet that everyone's like, hey, let's get out of here and go take care of some other teams. And obviously we'll talk about that more in the next segment when we look at the top 16. But I mean, just prognosticating a little bit about Kansas and Baylor, where do you see them fitting in right now?
So Kansas, I feel like was a little disrespected in the bracket preview, which we can get to in a bit. They were the 4th number 1 seed, I believe, in the preview. And I think that's they belong on the 1 line right now. I think that's clear. And they might even be above that 4th number 1 now, considering the bracket preview doesn't include that home win over Baylor.
Right. Yes. Keep in mind, folks, that preview is all before Saturday and Sunday's results. It doesn't factor those in. Let's make sure we're all aware of that. Keep going, Lukas. I'm sorry.
But I think Kansas has put itself in a really good spot to be on the 1 line. Basically, just sheer quantity of wins is off the charts. They have 13 quad 1 wins, which is home against the top 30, away against the top 75, or a neutral site win over a top 50 team in the net. They have 7 of those wins are in quad 1A, which is the upper half of that quadrant 1. They're 17-5 across the upper 2 quadrants. All 3 of those numbers lead the country. Their sheer number of quality wins is off the charts. They're probably going to land on the 1 line when we get there, barring a weird finish, I would say. And Baylor, I feel pretty good about being on the 2 line right now. Similarly, I don't think a road loss at Kansas really changes anything. They're top 10 in every metric that matters, except for Ken Palm, where they're down to 13. They're 8-7 across the first quadrant, 5 quad 1A wins, 13-7 across the upper 2 quadrants. Really, everything's on Baylor's side. They have a really good seed too. I think they're probably the top 2 teams selected out of the Big 12, and I think they're teams that a lot of people are going to pick to win their regions.
Okay, very interesting stuff there. Yeah, in terms of how the Big 12 is setting up right now, Kansas and Texas tied atop the standings with Baylor just 1 game back. So, Lukas, let's get into, before we move on to that top 16 reveal a little bit more fully, let's talk about our top 5 teams as of this week. Folks, as a reminder, heading back to last week, Andy's top 5 were Houston, Alabama, Purdue, UCLA, and Texas. That was coming off of Purdue's loss to Northwestern. I had Alabama and Houston, so I was flip-flopped. Also, Purdue 3rd. And then Texas and UCLA, I had them flip-flopped with Texas at 4, UCLA at 5. So, Lukas, the big question for you, just like the selection committee, did Houston do enough to jump back up into that number 1? Did Bama drop because of the loss at Tennessee? What do you have in your top 5 right now?
I still think Alabama is the best team in the country. They're number 1, my number 1. They're playing at a really high level, and when they're on, they are on. I mean, their game on Saturday was just a sheer dismantling, and something that they've done far too often in a pretty competitive SEC. They've made a lot of games look easy. They're not number 1 team in the country. Houston falls in at number 2. I have Kansas at 3. I think they've played really, really well. Their collection of wins is off the charts. They've really shown out against the upper echelon teams in the country this year. I have Purdue sliding in at 4. I think one of those groups that's trending down, but hard to say that they haven't put up the kind of season that belongs in the top 5. Another dominant win over Ohio State the day we record this. Ooh. And then I lean with Arizona at 5. I really like the Wildcats still, even with a recent loss. I think that they have a collection of high quality wins that I would put them a little bit higher than UCLA in the national scene. But I think all those teams are really close. Arizona, UCLA, a Baylor, and a Texas, kind of all in that range. I might even toss in, if we want to throw a dark horse, a healthy Creighton is pretty darn good. A double overtime road loss to Providence this week doesn't really concern me too much. I think they're a top 10 group.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm right with you. Our top 4 are identical, Lukas, so I won't belabor that point. But Bama, Houston, Kansas, Purdue for me. Kansas sliding past Purdue. Interesting to see there. We've talked so much about those freshman guards for Purdue and if they will hold up, Braden Smith and Mr. Lawyer. And, you just see a little crack here and there right now. And so that's enough for me to bump them down a notch. I have actually the other Pac-12 team as my number 5, UCLA, but I'm right with you. I'm not going to quibble over Arizona being in there either. I think they're both deserving on that top 2 seed line right now. Mm-hmm. And but as for the top 5, I've just believed in UCLA more for what they've actually done on the court. But that Arizona group of talent, when it's right, it is right, and you love it. And then we've just got those slight differences where I'm right there with Texas, Baylor, and Arizona in that next threesome coming out of that. Interestingly enough, you and I have never talked about this, but Creighton is my Big East pick. So I love you being all in on the Blue Jays there. What a neat thing to see how they've rebounded after getting Ryan Kalkbrenner back healthy and coming back from that 6-game losing streak. I mean, if they could do that, come back and win the Big East regular season, what a story that would be. Well, folks, we are going to get into that top 16 reveal from the selection committee, and we'll do that in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 23 depends all on the team members you surround yourself with. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, value, and experiences to help achieve those goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract and identify the most qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools and connecting with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all right there on one platform. You want to achieve your business goals in 23, and the right team member might help you do just that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, we are joined today by Lukas, Harkins bracketologist for HeatCheckCBB. And with that in mind, we want to dive in on the results we heard Saturday from the selection committee, who, as they've done for several years now, revealed their top 16. So we got the top 4 seeds in each bracket as it would stand as of Saturday. Once again, we said it earlier, but just keep in mind, these spots right now do not reflect anything that happened on Saturday or Sunday. So that said, let me run us through it real quick, and then we'll just have some discussion about it. The 1 seeds, and these are going to be in order from 1 to 16 on the S curve. Just think about it. If you're a fantasy football drafter, you know, when you do a snake draft, it's like that. We're just going 1 to 16 all the way back and forth. So number 1 seeds, Alabama, number 1, not Houston. Houston, number 2, Purdue 3, Kansas 4. The 2 seeds, so this will be teams 5 through 8, Texas, Arizona, Baylor, UCLA. The 3 seeds, 9 through 12, Tennessee, Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas State. And the 4 seeds, so 13 through 16, Indiana, Marquette, Gonzaga, and Xavier. Lukas, the first place I want to start, and we don't have to be long on this because we kind of just talked about it as we revealed our top 5 there, but I think there's going to be a lot of debate right at the top of Bama versus Houston. And I think a lot of that comes because Alabama had that road loss at Tennessee midweek last week on Wednesday. And so I think people thought that they would just jump right back in. Here's my take on it, and I want to hear if you agree or disagree, is that is like kind of AP voter thinking where it's like, oh, a team loses, we jump them down, rather than, hey, you as a bracketologist can't do that. You have to look at the entire resume. Okay, we add that data point now. So what does that mean for this team and how we evaluate them? And clearly, as the selection committee looked at that, they still thought that Bama had a better resume than Houston. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the right way of putting it. I mean, if you want to look at the full body of work as the committee is intended to do for the teams, Alabama just has a simply better resume to me. They have better high-end wins, and their worst losses, they're all in quad 1. All 4 of their losses are in quad 1. Houston has a quad 3 loss. Quite simply, I think it's a pretty straightforward argument to make for Alabama right now. They're number 1 in both of the resume metrics, strength of record and KPI. They're 7-4 across the upper 2 quadrants. They're 7-4 across the upper quadrant, quad 1. They're 14-4 across the upper 2 quadrants. I think they almost have nearly double the amount of quad 1 wins that Houston has right now. Obviously, some of that comes down to availability of opportunity.
Sure.
And the SEC provides way more of those than the AAC. But with that said, Alabama has taken advantage of those opportunities, and I think that puts them as the number 1 overall seed right now.
Yeah, and you can't fault them for taking advantage of that. And if you're Houston and you want to complain, go join a different conference. Oh, wait, you will next year, and things will be good there for Kelvin Sampson and company. I mean,
yeah, and I'll say another thing on that, in that if Houston remains as the number 2 overall seed, they're probably going to be in pretty good shape overall. Because if with the way regionals are set up this year, Kansas City and Louisville are the 2 regional finals that they would prefer to be in compared to Vegas and New York. Either one of those, I think, would be just fine for Houston as the number 1 or 2 overall seed.
And they were in that Kansas City bracket, if I remember correctly, on the reveal. I don't have it up in front of me, but just like going back to, we talked about what Bama did to Georgia on Saturday, a 49-point victory. Let me put that margin in perspective. There were 6 Division I teams on Saturday that scored a total fewer points than Alabama's margin of victory. Wagner, Oregon State, Rhode Island, Louisiana Monroe, Lafayette, and Cal all had fewer than 49 points. That's how many points Alabama won by. This team,
Alabama won by so many, it's handing out strays from this podcast.
Yes, Lukas, I love it, man. That's so good. And 2 of those teams I just listed off are like Power 6 teams there. Oregon State and Cal, of course, they're both miserable by their own rights. But it is what it is this year. Now, another thing, we look at this top 16, 5 of the top 12, that would be Kansas on the 1 line, Texas and Baylor on the 2 line, and then Iowa State and Kansas State on the 3 line. We have 5 of the top 12 are Big 12 schools, not to mention however many of the other 5 teams in the conference make the tournament itself. Fair, unfair, right, wrong? What do you think on those placements, Lukas?
Yeah, I would like to say that it was really complimentary to the Big 12. I think Kansas State and Iowa State were probably a seed line ahead of where I would have expected them to be. But at the same time, Kansas, I think, was lower on the 1 seed line than I thought they could have been. I think they could have been the number 2 or number 3 overall seed. So I think overall the Big 12 came out pretty well, but I thought Kansas was a little bit disrespected on the 1 line with their sheer quantity of wins at the top level of quadrants. I think that they should have probably been a tad bit higher, but the rest of the Big 12 put itself in good shape. And I think the teams in the top 4 seed lines today, all those teams are going to make the tournament. They're locks, essentially. They're locked on making March Madness. And if you really go into what the top 16 could mean, I think looking towards the bubble closer for the Big 12, that's a team like a West Virginia or an Oklahoma State that I think benefits nicely from seeing so many teams in the Big 12 be highly regarded by the committee in late February.
And unfortunately for Oklahoma State, they did themselves 0 favors on Saturday, getting blasted at TCU, of course, who had
a healthy TCU.
Do what?
A healthy TCU.
A healthy TCU, exactly. Had Mike Miles and Eddie Lampkin back in the starting lineup, and that is a big deal for Jamie Dixon's team, who are looking to make a bump themselves in their seeding. Lukas, as you look at that top 16, what were the committee's biggest misses, in your opinion, either in terms of like teams that weren't included or teams that were seeded too high or too low?
Yeah, I think it's always tough because the committee changes and how they really want to approach things is different on a year. I think it's more kind of gauging what we learned from the top 16 and what could affect the eventual 68 that they do select and seed. So I think one of the biggest takeaways was respect for the general Big 12 outside of Kansas. But even then, Kansas still ended up on the 1 line. It's hard to say they were extremely disrespected. But the Big 12 got I think 2 teams probably a seed line ahead of where I would have projected them in Kansas State and Iowa State. I would say conversely, as the Big 12 benefited, the Big East did not. Yeah. I think you could have made an argument for Xavier or Marquette being up on the 3 line. And I think it was probably the biggest surprise exclusion was UConn. Yep. And the biggest surprise inclusion was Indiana. And I think in the past, there's been a lot of discussion about the committee taking into account full body of work over recency as really the biggest be-all, end-all is your total body of work. And really with the decision of Indiana over UConn, there's only 2 true explanations there. Indiana has better high-quality road wins, but I'm not sure that necessarily overmatches UConn's overall body of work and metrics and everything that they have an advantage over Indiana. However, Indiana has played better and has better results of late. So potentially as we get towards the Selection Sunday and Selection Show, it might be worth noting which teams are playing better coming into that weekend, and if the committee takes into account how well a team is playing relative to its total body of work.
That's a great point, Lukas, and something for us to definitely keep an eye on. Obviously, the committee was breathing a huge sigh of relief as Indiana held on at home against Illinois on Saturday. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Let's end this part of our conversation with just one more question from me to you. Do you like this top 16 reveal? Would you rather it be like, if you were choosing between these three options, which would you take? No reveal, top 16, or a full 64 or 68?
I don't think I would like a full 64 or 68. I think it would honestly, it would take away a lot of stuff, I think, for teams. Like if they're sitting as like a 6 on the early 68, I think they might feel more comfortable than they might actually be. Like the committee might just not have a huge difference between a 6 and a 9.
Right.
We don't know what those margins are. So I don't think I would like to do that. I'd like to just keep it as a full, either I would put no reveal over full 68. But I think the top 16, I think, is nice. I don't think it necessarily matters all that much, but I think it gives some clue into what the committee might be thinking, and also gives us, if there's a huge difference between the top 16 reveal and the 68, it gives us something else to complain about. And what's wrong with that?
Nothing. Love it. And especially like as we look at like the AP poll, we'll find a lot out today on Monday as this episode drops. For example, the biggest discrepancy was UCLA was 4 spots higher in the AP poll than they were on the S curve in the reveal. And so it'll be interesting to see what the AP voters do when we see the newest top 25 roll out today. And then it just gives us more to argue about and talk about, which is a lot of fun for people like you and me. Folks, we want to hear from you. Drop some comments in. We would love to know what you think about this top 16 reveal. Where'd they get it right? Where'd they get it wrong? Do you like it? Let us know. Well, we're going to move into our 6-pack where we just look at 6 other things that happened this weekend. But before we get there, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. You looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories? Then you gotta try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays a couple of months ago, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. I'm failing at that miserably, by the way. But if you're like me and you want to eat healthier without sacrificing the taste, then man, I have just the thing for you. You got to try Built Bar because healthy is actually tasty. What makes Built so good? Well, first off, they cover their bars with 100% real chocolate, not to mention these flavors. Some like this, churro, you kidding me? Peanut butter brownie, yes, I want all of that smoke right now. And I'm not sure how Built does it, but they always have these bars with amazing macros that still taste like a candy bar. Just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and yet 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get an order from Built.com because Uncle Sam Walton, they're at Walmart or Sam's Club, they're carrying these Built bars in store. So run on down to Walmart, get yourself a 4-count of cookies and cream, or if you want to go bulk size, knock yourself out at Sam's Club. Try a Built Bar. You won't be disappointed. A proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. All right, Lukas, let's get into this 6-pack. 6 other things from around the weekend that were notable for one reason or another. And obviously, folks, as always, there's no way for us to hit on all 363 teams in Division I, but we want to get a couple of them to you. Lukas, a mantra of mine, this is our first drink in the 6-pack, is this: don't trust Tennessee. This team, man, that defense is just right there. Number 1 in the nation at KenPom. So good, but that offense outside the top 60, and you'll have things like them beating Bama at home on Wednesday, but then you'll have the back-to-back buzzer-beating losses, and then you'll have what happened in Rupp Arena on Saturday where Kentucky knocked off the Vols 66-54. Kentucky was up by 20 at the half. I mean, it's like you just cannot trust Tennessee. I will say it over and over and over again. And the problem is not, for me, is not them losing to Kentucky on Saturday in Rupp. That's understandable. Kentucky, I'm curious to hear your thought, but it seems like they're moving their way back on the right side of the bubble at this point. The problem, though, is them losing to Vanderbilt and Mizzou and Florida. If they want to be as elite as their defense suggests they are, they just cannot have those kind of performances. What do you notice from these two teams? And are you with me on I can't trust Tennessee to win 4 games in a row to make it to Houston? And it seems like Kentucky might be rounding into shape.
Yeah, I'll start with Kentucky. I think they've put themselves. I think they trended very close to the projected cut line for bracketology. In that last 4 in group for a little bit, they had a really big week. Quite frankly, winning at Mississippi State is an underrated result. It's a road win for Kentucky and a road win over another team in the bubble. And those are big swing games because they not only help you but also drop a team that's in the same category as you right now. That's a big swing game for them. And then they picked up the huge quality win over Tennessee. I think they put themselves in a pretty good position to dance. So they have I would say, a tricky closing schedule, quite frankly. They go at Florida. It's never easy to win on the road. Then they get Auburn at home, a tournament team. And then they get Vanderbilt at home, who's playing probably the best ball Vanderbilt has in a while. Playing really well right now. And then they go at Arkansas, which isn't an easy one. So I think they aren't really games to necessarily boost Kentucky's profile overall. Tennessee was their last really high quality opportunity. But these games provide some potential slip ups. But I think Kentucky's put itself in a pretty good position to make the tournament. A strong finish will do that. As for Tennessee, I really wanted to come into this year and say we can trust Tennessee. It seems like we've never really been able to trust Tennessee as of late. Just seems like every year they're a top 10-ish team that people pick to the Final Four, and that doesn't happen. It almost feels like we're waiting on a year where everyone's going to pick them to lose early, and then they go on that run. So I would agree with you. It's hard to trust Tennessee right now, but if something's going to break the mold, might as well lose in the regular season and win in the postseason, right?
Hey, why not? I really thought that Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield team was going to be the one to do it, and they just, man, that was such a bummer. But, man, yes, Knoxville, happy days are going to come at some point. We believe it. Number 2 in our 6-pack, and this will be 2 and 3. There were tight Big 12 games coming down the stretch simultaneously. So this first game and then the next one. So number 2, number 19, Iowa State in Manhattan at Kansas State. Wildcats win 61-55. They were down by 8 at halftime, a 14-3 extended run for Kansas State to take a 37-34 lead. And Jerome Tang keeps it going and ultimately pulls off this 6-point victory over that tough Iowa State defense. Great stuff there. Man, more Big 12 conversation. I know we looked at both of these teams in that top 16. Where are you at with these guys here, Lukas?
Yeah, I don't think it changes too much. I think it's another pull ahead probably for Kansas State over Iowa State. But as I mentioned earlier, it's just so hard to win on the road in the Big 12 right now that Kansas State holding serve is a good thing. I would say just from a micro standpoint of it, Marquise Noel, good God, what a second half. He was electric. He's been electric all year. He's been one of the best guards in the country. If you haven't watched Big 12 basketball, or you haven't watched Kansas State basketball, first of all, how are you listening to this podcast and not doing that? Second of all, he's a treat to watch, and they're a really fun group.
Just a little tiny guy, Marquise Noel, but boy, is he fun, as you said. Well, the other game coming down to the wire at the exact same time was Oklahoma at number 6, Texas. Went to overtime. The Longhorns hold on 85-83. This game was 34 all at the half. The Sooners got out to a second half lead, and I'm sitting here thinking, man, this could be massive for Oklahoma as they're just desperately trying to claw their way into some kind of contention. Serge Jabari Rice knocks down some back-to-back threes to put Texas back in front. But Oklahoma, I really loved their resolve in punching back to tie this game and get to overtime. And so for Texas, hey, nice job holding on. I honestly thought this game was more about Oklahoma and what they were able to do than Texas not living up to it. I mean, how close is Oklahoma? Is there any hope for them?
I don't think so. They just fell under 500. They're 13-14 on the year. Conference record's meaningless, I would say overall. Just as a reminder to people in bracketology, your conference record is not really a factor. However, losing 11 times out of your last 15 games is a factor. It's just too many losses. They put themselves in a spot that's going to be really hard to overcome. I think they probably have to win out the regular season in a tough Big 12. I don't see it happening. As for Texas, they're pretty solidly where they are, obviously featured in the bracket preview top 16. And as you hit on it, Serge Jabari Rice has been as clutch as just about anybody this year.
Man, Yes, he has. It's funny talking about, early in the season, just Tyrese Hunter. And we just talked about Iowa State. And man, just Texas has all of these dudes that could step up at a given moment and do work there. And it's just so good to see Texas come up off the floor after everything that went down with Coach Beard. Let's switch to the Big Ten for the fourth part of our six-pack. Illinois at Indiana, number 14. We talked about this one a little bit earlier, but the Hoosiers escape, and I do mean escape, with a 71-68 victory. Coming into this one, Lukas, no Terrence Shannon for Illinois, and I thought, ball game. Like Trace Jackson Davis going to take over. JHS, Jalen Hood-Schifino, stud freshman. He's going to do work, and Indiana's going to win comfortably. That was not the case, as Matthew Meyer, the roller coaster that he is, had one of his really strong days, but just a weaker second half, and Indiana is able to hold on, although they did survive an Illinois look at three for overtime right at the end. Don't know why they didn't foul up three.
Not a great 7 seconds defensively.
No,
I would say.
no, that is so true. But more so than Indiana, because we already touched on them. What's going on with Illinois right now? What would you do with them, or what are you doing with them?
I'm not too concerned with Illinois. They've lost 3 of the last 4, but all 3 have been on the road. A little bit more forgivable in that matter. I mean, really, they only have one disastrous attempt coming up. That's at home against Minnesota. There's really the only chance in the entire Big Ten for a really bad loss is at home against Minnesota. So as long as they get through that, they're going to be perfectly fine. I think they're probably in the 6 to 8 seed range right now. Probably more on the better side of that than the worse. But I think they put themselves in a pretty good position. And I think even a loss to Indiana, I think playing them so tight without Terrence Shannon is something the committee, if they really want to, can take into account and give Illinois a little bit of a boost compared to a full loss there.
Yes, especially being on the road at Assembly Hall, a very difficult place to go win. Parts 5 and 6 of our six-pack. We're going to blow past 5 quickly and land on number 6. Number 5 is there were multiple 30-point blowouts from some of our top teams. Alabama, we already touched on, 108-59 over Georgia, and UCLA 78-43 over Cal. Now, Georgia
kind of feels like what, week 10 in the SEC?
Exactly. Yes, that's right. Where they're all playing like Samford or somebody like that. Yeah. Furman, these 30+ point blowouts. And you look at the opponents and you say, of course they're going to do that. But keep in mind, Clemson lost to Louisville on Saturday. So this is not only is this level of blowout not a given, just frankly, winning is not a given. And so just keep that in mind. What Alabama and UCLA did, albeit against lesser competition, to win by that margin just shows how legit they are to not play down to their opponents. Let's move on to the final part of our six-pack, and this is the top of the ACC. Now, we all know the ACC is down this year. So much of that is Duke and North Carolina and their continuing struggles. North Carolina lost again at NC State on Sunday. Brother, it happens. But these two teams at the top, I had said for a lot of the season that Virginia, I thought, was the team to put it all together and win the ACC. And as we come down the stretch, I have begun to believe more in Miami. I don't know. Miami's down a half game right now. Yeah. And I don't know if there are enough games left to jump past the Cavs. But at this point, I would go far enough to say I trust Miami more than Virginia once we hit the NCAA tournament. I think a lot of that, despite the experience of Keyonte Clark, man, just Isaiah Wong and several other like that Miami backcourt, man, it is dirty. Miami beats
guards win in March, baby.
Guards win in March. Don't trust Tennessee. Guards win in March. That's our mantras of today's show. And so, I mean, Lukas, are you with me there? It seems like Virginia is going to be able to hold on. Their schedule's not too tough down the stretch, which would be true for anyone at the top of the ACC. But, like, are you with me that Miami might seem like they're trending in a more positive direction than Virginia long-term for the rest of the season?
Yeah, Miami's had a lot of really, really good wins this year. I mean, kind of dating back the whole year. I mean, as the season has obviously of late, they beat Clemson on the road, Duke at home, North Carolina on the road, Wake Forest at home, amidst their current 6-game winning streak. But I think they've also had some wins from non-conference. They've just aged better than people probably thought. I mean, Providence is now up to, a pretty surefire NCAA tournament team. They beat them on a neutral site by double digits. They got a home win over Rutgers, who's going to be an NCAA tournament team. Same thing there. And even early in the year, I mean, they got the NC State and Virginia wins at home all before the new year in the ACC. And those are wins that I think continue to carry weight. I think that, as you mentioned, their guards are tremendous. I think that puts them in a pretty good spot, especially if they're able to make that jump from a 5 to a 4. I think right now I'd put them on the 5 line. I think the committee did too in the bracket preview. They were mentioned as one of the first teams to not be in the top 16. And I think the big difference, really, if you're going to compare seeds at the top of the bracket, the difference between a 3 and a 4, I think, is relatively negligible. But between a 4 and a 5, no one wants to see those best mid-majors in the 12 seed.
No, they do not. That is a good word. Well, Virginia held on, had to survive a 3-pointer at the buzzer to beat Notre Dame on Saturday, 57-55. Miami won a little more comfortably over Wake Forest, 96-87. Keep in mind, as Lukas just said, Miami does hold the tiebreaker over Virginia. And so if they can get that thing knotted up, they would have the number 1 seed in the ACC tournament. Great show. Great to be back together on a Monday. Big thanks to Lukas for joining us in Andy's absence. Great to get to talk some bracketology. Thank you so much, sir. Please do not forget to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and leave comments as we've already talked about. We will be back with you tomorrow, myself, and we'll be talking some more of this bracketology, some more of the reveal, plus big Monday coming off of those games. As always, my apologies to the lawyer family, and until tomorrow, peace.